Greetings. I wanted to very briefly discuss an obscure part of rabbinic interpretation, which I think some might find interesting, as it has relevance to how one might understand the biblical text in general, or at least portions of it, and as far as this video is concerned, how one might understand the book of Isaiah in particular. So to begin, I want to first cover a basic note about the Hebrew alphabet or Hebrew orthography. On your screen, you see two Hebrew characters. In fact, they're actually different graphical forms of the same single character, that being the mem. The form on the form on the right is how the character is typically written. The form on the left is called the mem sophit, or final mem. The character is only written in this way when it appears at the end of a word. If the character appears anywhere else in the word, such as at the beginning of the word or anywhere in the middle of the word, the regular form, the form on the right, is used. So again, the form on the left is the graphical form that the character takes only at the end of a word. Let me give you an example. So, for example, the example I want to give, on your screen you have two Hebrew words, right? The word on the top is melech, which means king. And highlighted in red is the first letter, which is the standard mem, as it appears typically at the beginning of a word. And on the bottom of the screen is the word shalom, which means peace. Highlighted in blue is the last character, which is the mem sophit, or final mem, taking on the distinct form that it does when that character appears at the end of a word. So again, this sort of open mem, or the regular mem, appears, takes that form if it's at the beginning or anywhere in the middle of a word. The closed mem, or the mem sophit, the final mem, only takes that form that it has if it's at the end of a word. So with that in mind, I'd like to note something which will not appear in most online reproductions of the Hebrew Bible or the Masoretic text, yet which does appear in printed copies. And I think this is significant. For example, on your screen is a page from Isaiah in the Art Scroll Tanakh. So I'm going to zoom in on the start of Isaiah 9:6, which corresponds to verse 7 in Christian translations. So here you go. I'll put it right at the center of the screen, the word I want to focus on. And notice that the way that first word of the verse, lamarbe, now again, this is Isaiah 9:6 in the Art Scroll Tanakh, corresponding to verse 7 in Christian translations. Notice the way lamarbe, the word lamarbe, is spelled. Notice the second character in particular. Notice that it has a final mem where a regular mem should be. It's a closed mem. It takes that closed form, and yet, being that it's in the middle of the word, it should be an open mem, the regular form. In fact, if you were taking an introductory course to Hebrew and you wrote a word with a mem sophit in the middle of it, your instructor would probably tell you that you had made a mistake. So that honestly makes this reading all the more curious. However, just for a bit of a segue and for the sake of full disclosure, that reading doesn't appear in our oldest copy of Isaiah, that being the Great Isaiah Scroll, which was found at Qumran. Here I'll focus in on the word which appears at the beginning of verse 6 or verse 7, depending on your edition. The relevant word is lemarbe, and you'll see there in the Great Isaiah Scroll, it's an open mem. So this curious reading that I'm focusing on doesn't appear in our oldest copy of Isaiah. Nonetheless, this curious spelling is consistently found in printed editions of the Masoretic text. On your screen, you see another printed edition of the Tanakh, other than the Art Scroll edition, and that being the Dotan edition of the Leningrad Codex. And you find the same curious spelling. So I'm going to again focus in on verse 6. Here we go. And again, we see this word lemarbe, with the closed mem, the final mem, the mem sophit, appearing as the second character of the word. And this begs a question. Why does this curious reading consistently appear in printed editions of the Masoretic text? Might it be more than a mere scribal or typographical error? Interestingly, Rabbinic Judaism would answer that question in the affirmative. The closed mem in the text is not, from a rabbinic perspective, is not just some scribal error or typographical error. It has a significant meaning. And with that in mind, it's here that I'd like to turn to the Babylonian Talmud, Talmud Bavli. Now, at this point, the entire Babylonian Talmud can be found online, And on your screen is specifically Tractate Shabbat, Daf, or page 104b. If I can zoom in just a little bit, you'll see at the top line, the middle of the screen, you see the word Shabbat, and then on the left you see Kuf Dalet and then a period. So Shabbat is the Tractate Shabbat, and Kuf Dalet represents 104, and the dot signifies that it's the second side of page 104, so 104b. Now, to explain the basic structure of a typical page of Talmud, notice that you see three main columns. There's other smaller columns to the left and the right, but the three main columns, which you can see on your screen, the column in the middle is the actual Talmudic text, and the columns on the right and the left are commentaries on that Talmudic text, elucidating certain statements within it. Relevant to this discussion, the column on the right of this particular page is the commentary of Rashi, one of the most famous and authoritative commentators within Rabbinic Judaism. So with that out of the way, I'd like to focus in on a specific statement about halfway down the page. So bear with me 1 second. Here we go. So I'm going to put it right at the top of the screen. And this portion reads, Mem patucha, mem setuma. An open mem, a closed mem. And then it continues. Ma'amar patuch, ma'amar satum. So what it's saying is that, an open statement and a closed statement, or a secret statement. Now, what this line essentially means is that you have open mems and closed mems, right? The character mem can be open or closed, and an open mem corresponds to an open statement. A statement that is patuach, and a closed mem can signify a closed statement or a secret statement even. Now, of course, that begs the question, what exactly is the Talmud saying here? And to try and get a little bit more insight into the rabbinic conception of what is being said here, I'd like to turn to the commentary of Rashi in the column, which I mentioned before. So notice that this is the commentary of Rashi, and starting at the top of the screen in the bold text, you have the statement that I just read. So, ma'amar patuach u'ma'amar satum. Now, this is what Rashi has to say about that. This is how he explains it. So first he says, Yesh debarim shenatan rashut ledorshan, right? Which means there are words which have been given permission to be expounded upon, to be explained. Then he adds, Yesheata mitzaweh lesotman, which means there are other statements which you are commanded to keep secret. Now think about what this means. Within Rabbinic Judaism, there are understandings of the text that can be shared openly. However, there are other understandings of certain texts which are not permitted to be shared. We might think of these as being esoteric meanings, only known or held to by an inner core. And the presence of an esoteric meaning to a text can be hinted at by the presence of an out-of-place closed mem, a mem sofit, which is not at the end of the word. With that in mind, it's quite interesting that such a closed mem appears in Isaiah 9:6 in printed editions of the Masoretic text. There are folks out there who try to limit the meaning of Isaiah 9:6 to only that which is explicit and on the surface and only can be gleaned from reading the text in a vacuum, or only those meanings which are popular. However, it's worth noting that the rabbinic paradigm does not limit the meanings of the text in such a way. Rather, the rabbinic paradigm, Rabbinic Judaism, sees the text as hinting at meanings beyond that which is on the surface, or beyond that which is popularly known. And I think that's quite interesting when it pertains to specifically Isaiah 9. With that, I hope viewers found that interesting, and I look forward to discussing this in the comment sections further. Thank you very much.